Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. A likely end to the Surrey police saga with a strong order from the province.
Moving forward with the Surrey Police Service is the only path forward to protect the safety of the people of Surrey and across BC.
The criticism from the city's mayor and what happens next. Plus, hours after vowing to continue job action, why BC port workers revoke strike notice again.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
And to the long saga involving policing in Surrey now, with the province ordering the city to move forward with its transition to a municipal force. Surrey's mayor is once again coming out slamming the decision, but Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says this is final. Keeping the RCMP in Surrey, the province says, would be unsafe.
Unfortunately, the City of Surrey has failed to meet mandatory requirements to go back to the RCMP. That puts people at risk.
One of the big concerns for Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth was the prospect of the already short-staffed Surrey RCMP needing to recruit from other units,
creating RCMP staffing deficits in other areas of the province. This means pulling officers from the major crime section and their unit that deals with organized crime, pulling officers from highway patrol, decreasing traffic enforcement and monitoring. These services are critical to the safety of everyone in British Columbia.
Farnworth is using extraordinary powers under the Police Act and says he's confident in the legality of it all. This comes after 8 months of the transition being on pause because newly elected Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke vowed to stop it. She isn't speaking today, but in a statement says the decision to continue with the transition is disappointing, misguided, and based on inaccurate assumptions. What has occurred today is the undermining of a local government. She says it's very clear the city of Surrey never had a choice in the matter. The province is recommitting $150 million to help with the transition and has appointed former Deputy Minister to the Premier and BC Hydro CEO Jessica McDonald as an advisor. Farnworth plans to introduce legislation in the fall to make sure something like this never happens again. Now, the full scope of that transition is expected to take about 3 years. For some analysis on all of this, let's bring in Municipal Affairs reporter Justin McElroy live. Justin, Mayor Brenda Locke not holding a press conference today, simply releasing a statement. What does this say?
It's interesting, Anita. It was 3 months ago when originally Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth issued this as a recommendation that she came out swinging with a fiery press conference saying that it didn't matter that she chose the RCMP. Not doing a press conference today doesn't allow her a chance to have those cameras in front of her to make those bold statements. Instead, in that statement that you showed a little bit about, tucked in at the end, she said she would talk to staff and council before saying what the city's next steps were. But it was interesting. In the hours after that, a number of different groups came out with their own statements, and it seemed for many of them, they believe that the battle is over. Take a look at the Mayor of Vancouver, Ken Sim, putting out a release saying, "We appreciate the minister for bringing this matter to a close," saying it's time to move forward on policing in the Lower Mainland. The National Police Federation, which has been in Locke's corner throughout all this, now saying that what's key is calling on the Premier and Minister of Public Safety to prepare an expeditious transition plan that includes a clear and imminent end date for the Surrey RCMP. For them, it's not a question of if, it's now when. And then you look at the BC RCMP itself and their commanding officer, Dwayne McDonald, saying that, yes, they understand that the minister has directed the city to continue with the transition to the police service, and saying what's important is to get clarity and specifics on the exact path forward. So again, 3 months ago, there seemed to be the opportunity for a further conflict here, and people that were maybe in Locke's corner or at least being neutral on the question. Now it seems there's not a heck of a lot of support around her, at least at this moment.
Very interesting, for sure. And there's been a lot of talk about Surrey potentially launching legal action if the province was going to make them do this transition. Farnworth was asked about that, but stood strong in his lack of worry about it, I guess we could say. Where do we stand, and how hard of a fight would it be for Surrey?
Well, when municipalities try and take take legal action against provinces. Their record is pretty poor, judges recognizing that municipalities are creatures of the province. But the question is whether that Farnworth has the ability under the Police Act to do what's best under the auspices of safety for the entire province. That's what he said today. It's part of the reason why the province ultimately decided 3 months ago they first had to put conditions in place instead of leaping straight to ordering Surrey to what to do. So certainly a lot of municipal lawyers across the province have been phoned and consulted on this over the past few weeks as the city tries to see what sort of path that they have. What's clear tonight, at least, is that there's not a lot of people other than Mayor Brenda Locke that seem to think this is a viable path forward at this point.
Justin McElroy live with us, and we will have Wally Opal live with us after the break later in the show. Tonight, BC port workers have revoked their notice to strike again, just hours after they said they'd continue job action this weekend. This as Ottawa has been facing mounting pressure to mandate them back to work. Renee Filipponi has more on what's happening.
Less than 24 hours after this picket line in Vancouver went up, down it came again. The latest strike action ruled illegal because the union didn't give 72 hours notice, a decision it's challenging. The employer is calling this a reckless labor disruption by the union and publicly laid out terms of the tentative deal that's been rejected, including the 19.2% wage increase over 4 years.
It's changing so rapidly.
But this labor expert says workers have another big concern.
They're afraid there's going to be more automation and more of these jobs are going to be lost. And that seemed to be a big sticking point for the union.
When the deal was presented last week by a federal mediator, it was initially accepted. But days later, a caucus of union leaders turned it down.
I can't help but feel that whatever is separating the parties is not worth this disruption. They've got to sort it out at the table as quickly as possible.
These are our key months in our business, so any delay will affect our bottom line.
This importer and distributor of souvenirs says the strike has been a roller coaster. She has 3 shipments on their way to BC ports in limbo.
And then we have shipments that are about to leave China, also in a little bit of a flux as they don't know whether they should route it via Vancouver or through Halifax. So Halifax takes an extra 30 days for us.
Those delays and uncertainty have business leaders urging action from Ottawa, saying the strike is hurting the port's reputation and costing more than $500 million in lost trade a day.
So we have this incredible bottleneck that's backed up all the way through the supply chains in Canada, and now we're adding more to that. The economic consequences for Canadians in every part of the country are going to be enormous.
Earlier today, the union issued strike notice that was set to expire Saturday. Then this afternoon, a bulletin that they had revoked that notice. Just another step in this very fluid situation. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
A 15-year-old girl has died after falling into a waterfall. Revelstoke RCMP say they were called at 6 o'clock Sunday evening when the girl lost her footing on slippery rocks. The girl's stepfather dove in to try to rescue her. He was pulled from the water by a helicopter, but the girl was found dead on Monday. Well, the transit strike in the eastern Fraser Valley is another step closer to ending. A First Transit spokesperson says the company is prepared to accept the mediator's recommendations. The operator says it is eager for the strike to end and for service to be restored quickly. On Monday, the union asked its members to accept the mediator's proposals. If that's ratified by workers, it would bring the job action to an end. For its part, the union says it's been grateful for expert negotiator Vince Reddy and his mediation, and they'll meet with membership to seek ratification. Well, BC Ferries is suspending some sailings between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay so it can repair a suspected oil leak on one of its largest vessels. Repairs to the Coastal Celebration will start on Monday in dry dock, with the vessel expected back in service later this week. That week, starting tomorrow, that means 8 fewer sailings every day between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay. BC Ferries will contact passengers with current bookings to coordinate. Those without a booking are encouraged to consider traveling as a foot passenger because of reduced vehicle capacity. And we're learning more tonight about the damage from a wildfire near Cranbrook. 7 homes in the First Nation community of Ackham have been destroyed. Let's go now to our Corey Bullock with the new details and the devastation.
Smoky skies and flames in the distance. Despite the losses, many homes have been saved. And Cranbrook firefighters and the BC Wildfire Service are being credited for that.
I just want to say I'm really proud of my staff for doing what we did.
The more than 800-hectare St. Mary's River fire north of Cranbrook likely started because of a downed power line. And when crews went in to investigate, they found a second line hit by a falling tree. Power has now been restored to more than 370 homes. But the fire has continued to grow since it first broke out on Monday.
And that we're expanding our organizational structure to make sure that we are bringing in enough support and enough expertise to manage this incident effectively.
He says crews will continue to prioritize structure protection in Ackham and across the river to Fort Steele. Creating containment lines with ground crews and heavy equipment is just one of several ways to do that. But the community is grieving.
The last couple of days, a large portion of my community has had to be elsewhere, out of their homes. Right now, we have folks whose entire lives and possessions are completely gone. And so something that is usable with the clothing that's coming in is we're actually requesting for like brand new underwear, both men and women, children to adult. Socks, that kind of thing.
Pierre is warning people trying to take advantage of the situation.
We've been made aware of some bogus GoFundMe pages that are using our community name. Our community is not using GoFundMe in any way.
He says the Ackham First Nation has not and will not create one. Any monetary donations should be going through Ackham administration. And for now, as the fire burns, the community will do all that it can to support one another. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
When you're trying to beat a heat wave and stay cool, a spot under a shaded tree is the perfect refuge. But in some urban areas, those trees can be few and far between, making that oasis hard to find. As the CBC's Camille Vernet reports, New Westminster is trying to broaden that canopy, adding as many as 12,000 trees in the next 7 years.
In downtown New Westminster, the midday heat is sizzling, with little tree cover to shade pedestrians. And that needs to change, according to the city's arborist.
Trees definitely save life. They are cooling the environment. They're producing oxygen and capturing fine particles. It just makes the air so much better to breathe here.
The city has promised to plant 12,000 trees by 2030.
We're called the Little Brooklyn of BC. We have a very high density, 80,000 people, and it is very challenging to find places to plant trees. So what we need to do is to be strategic about finding the right place for the trees.
To find the right spots, the city mapped areas with a lack of tree cover. Those areas ended up being spots where the most vulnerable live.
The tree cover in North American cities is absolutely inequitable, and we find that perhaps not surprisingly, the neighborhoods with the most ample tree cover are also the wealthiest.
And this inequity can have dramatic consequences when temperatures are rising. In the heat dome of 2021, New Westminster was hit hard.
It has a southern-facing aspect, so it's actually quite hot here compared to other parts of the region. And it suffered some of the highest mortality rates from the heat wave, and those disproportionately hit poor people, elderly people, and people in vulnerable living situations.
Having access to tree cover can make a big difference.
For people who don't have some sort of mechanical cooling like air conditioning or a heat pump, it may be better to go outside of their homes and sit in a shady park or someplace that has a fountain nearby. Whenever I talk about this, I say people don't die because it's too hot outside. They die because it is too hot inside.
so making that safe space outdoors all the more important.
The trees that we're planting are going to have an effect on the people that need it the most.
It's going to take time, but already life is buzzing in the shade. And there's hope that one day those trees can provide protection for creatures both small and large. Camille Vernet, Radio-Canada, New Westminster.
They're elusive creatures in abundance, but rarely seen. Now, a group of researchers from UBC is trying to track urban bats to get a better sense of how and where they live in Vancouver. Leanne Young is looking at why that information is urgently needed.
There's one right there, and there's one right over our heads. Yeah.
When your life's research is bats, a big night out looks different.
Oh, I love this. I can't get enough of this.
For weeks, these researchers from the University of British Columbia have been in parks in and around Vancouver at dusk, trying to capture and track bats in the city.
All right, I got one wing. I know, sweetheart.
The bats are weighed.
She seems kind of light.
Measured.
33.1.
And even milked to see if they're lactating females.
That tiny little drop of milk that's touching my glove right there.
And if they're large enough, tagged with transmitters. The hope is to gather enough data to know how many there are before danger strikes.
So now I'm going to do a wing swab on both her wings for PD.
PD, or Pseudogymnoascus destructans, the fungus that causes white nose syndrome, was detected in BC this year. It forces bats out of hibernation in winter when there's no food, so they starve.
Out east, that up to 95, even higher percentages of the population have been lost when white nose comes around, and so that might happen here as well.
Little brown bats like these, common in Vancouver, are now considered endangered. Researcher Jordy Sagers witnessed the destruction a decade ago in Nova Scotia.
It was devastating to see. We were literally walking on corpses as we entered the cave. There were just thousands of dead bats lying on the ground there.
Sagers says there's still no cure for white nose, only preventative treatments. But getting it to the bats is a challenge.
In the West, but actually also in the East, basically everywhere, we don't know where the majority of our bats are.
The hope is, with studies like this, scientists can find and protect the bats first before it's too late.
And there goes that one.
Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
I feel like bats are one of those creatures that you just love or you hate. I can't say I'm a big fan, but you, Darius?
Oh, I'm a big fan. My old research supervisor is big into bats, and so he got me really into bats. So I can't say a bad word about bats. So I'll say this forecast is for you, Dan. And let me tell you, white nose syndrome is a cold-loving fungus, and it would not like this forecast. We've got nothing but heat in the south. Lytton was the hottest place in Canada today, once again, with 38 degrees Celsius. But lots of heat everywhere, and it looks like that's going to stick around. We actually have heat warnings in a couple places. This one over Kelowna and Kamloops is new, but Lytton's been sticking around all day. And the really interesting thing that's happening here is this smoke warning over the central parts of the province, because we do have a high pressure system over the central parts of the province, but it's not looking too smoky around Prince George right now. It might get smokier tomorrow, but there does seem to be some surface level wind pushing some of that smoke away. This low pressure system could bring some cloud in the northwest tomorrow, but in Vancouver, it'll be the same story as today, nothing but sun. As we look into this evening, we're going to have warm temperatures around 20 still into overnight. And then again tomorrow morning, it looks like the heat is here to stay for a couple days, hottest tomorrow, but we'll have more on that later this hour.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
A New Westminster woman has been homeless ever since her apartment burned down in March. Teresa China makes $67,000 a year as an outreach worker for the province, but she's unable to find affordable housing for herself. She shared her story with us.
Historically, it's always been really easy to go find a place. You want to move, you move. Now I'm in July and I still sleeping at friends' places, so at times, a couple times in my car. Honestly, right now I want to cry about it because it's soul-sucking. It feels like I didn't do enough to support myself, my child, my pet. Like, my child's not living with me, my pet's not living with me, and I'm in my Fiat going to sleep. My community has been really supportive, but I don't want to impose on them. I'm been independent my whole life. It feels uncomfortable for me to ask for help in the first place. It's inhumane. Housing really is a human right, and there's a lot of hardworking people in BC that deserve to be housed. I understand people, and I appreciate that people want to invest and make money off of it, but I think housing should be a priority first, more than investment should. And I work in community providing supports for people who are homeless and need other types of supports within society. That is ironic because I'm someone who helps people find housing and I don't have housing myself. I'm not the only one in this situation. The more I talk about it, the more I have people in my own circles that know of other people who are going through pretty much similar situations as myself.
To Halifax now and the ongoing North American Indigenous Games. There are hundreds of BC athletes competing, and our Wamish Hamilton is there. He's introducing us to a Kamloops teen tonight who says wrestling is more than just a sport.
The excitement for Team BC's wrestling team is undeniable. Family and friends pack the bleachers, cheering on athletes at the North American Indigenous Games in Halifax. Among the spectators is to Kamloops' mother, Dawn McGrath. She's supporting her 15-year-old son, Maddox.
Absolutely proud, 100% proud. It's been a lot of work and a lot of dedication, and I'm a firm believer hard work pays off.
Maddox is one of several hundred BC athletes who are competing in the Games. He wrestles in the male 74-kilogram group. Maddox says wrestling is helping him deal with isolation brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic.
For me, COVID kind of took away a lot of the physical out of myself, and the way I found my way into wrestling is it was way more physically demanding. Like I needed to keep on top of my physical shape and all of that, and wrestling and combat sports in general was kind of the biggest outlet that I could give to myself.
His mother says those feelings of isolation were common in the community, especially affecting youth. Wrestling is providing an outlet to deal with Maddox's emotions in a healthy way.
It was a way that he could work through his frustrations and have the ability and discipline to manage the anger, the frustration, and the hurt that he felt coming through, and to regain his self-confidence, his presence, and his physical well-being, that he was happy with who he saw in the mirror.
Maddox says he's connecting deeper with his Indigenous identity and meeting athletes from other Indigenous communities. As for his support system, Maddox credits his coaches, teammates, and his mother.
Very grateful to the coaching staff, and they've kind of helped me a lot in this transition. And same with my mother, she's been with me every step of the way, supporting me, unconditional love. That's all you could ask for.
The thing I found is he found his laugh again. No words for the gratitude for what the sport brought back was my child.
Wamish Hamilton, CBC News, Halifax.
It's a big directive from the province, one that is supposed to mean an end to the Surrey police saga. But will that be so? After the break, former Attorney General and Chairman of the Surrey Police Task Force, Wally Opal, joins us live. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. The U.S. Commemorative Air Force is taking a pair of World War II-era planes on tour across North America. The Legends of Victory tour is currently in BC, and this week, the B-17 and B-25 bombers are in Cranbrook before heading to Penticton and Victoria. We took a behind-the-scenes look at the flying relics.
Hi, I'm Gordie Johnston. I'm from the Commemorative Air Force, and my title is Ground Operations Coordinator, or GOC. In other words, I'm the manager of the B-25 crew. Our real mission, really, is to educate, to inspire, and to honor the greatest generation. There never will be another greatest generation. We want to show folks and educate folks on what these young, brave men did in these planes. It costs a huge amount to operate these aircraft, and so that's our way of preserving history. These are flying museums. Of the B-17 history, there were 12,731 that were built. As we speak, Sentimental Journey is the only one that will be flying in North America this summer. So out of 12,731, we're down to precious, precious few. The B-25, at last count, we knew that there were 34 flying, so there's more. The B-25 is our combat veteran. It has 15 missions. The B-25 missions were primarily low altitude, strike and attack. The B-17, of which we're sitting in, is more, it's a heavy bomber. It bombed at higher altitudes. Bombing on a high altitude, it was intensely cold, minus 40, minus 45. They wore electric suits, electrified suits. In the earlier version, the windows were opposite each other and they were open. You can appreciate the mess that made with two gunners back to back, just an awful mess. These planes are built for freedom, not for comfort.
We're turning now to our top story. After months of back and forth, Surrey's policing saga may soon draw to a close. Today, BC's Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth ordered the city to continue its transition to the Surrey Police Service rather than revert to the RCMP.
I know that this is an extraordinary use of my powers under the Police Act, and I did not make this decision lightly. I've spoken with Mayor Locke to explain my decision. The mayor doesn't agree with my decision, but that won't stop me from doing the right thing for the people of Surrey and across our province.
Farnworth says Surrey has failed to demonstrate an ability to staff the Surrey RCMP without pulling officers from other communities and units, and the move to the RCMP would have caused an exodus of Surrey police officers. Mayor Brenda Locke, meanwhile, says the decision undermines local government, and she won't comment further until she meets with council and staff. For more on today's decision and what it means for Surrey moving forward, we're joined live by Wally Opal, former Attorney General of British Columbia, former BC Supreme Court judge, and the former chair of the Surrey Police Transition Task Force. You know, Mike Farnworth giving this order says he can do it under the Police Act, yes, and that he's exercising extraordinary powers. How big of a deal is this?
It is a big deal. First of all, it was a big deal for Surrey to establish its own police force. It was quite something what they did, and they have to be commended because they actually built the police force from the ground up. They did that because the previous city council in Surrey wanted to have their own police force so they could have more control over policing that they don't have with the RCMP. So it's big. Yeah, it's a big deal.
And a lot of work's already gone into this.
Absolutely.
Mayor Locke today, you know, questioning that use of power by Mike Farnworth. Does she have a point?
No, and I say that charitably because I understand her disappointment. But the fact is, it's a two-part process. Surrey has the right to decide what type of policing it wants, RCMP or their own police force. In 2018, they decided unanimously that they wanted their own police force. They wanted to move away from the RCMP because they're the largest city in Canada without their own police force. 4 years later, they changed their mind. That's not really a smart thing to do. But in any event, the province has to listen to them. So she has the right to go back, and she exercised that right. However, the Solicitor General is the chief law enforcement officer of the province. So he asked, okay, if you want to go back to the RCMP, tell me what plan you have that will meet with the standards of public safety. And clearly, the Surrey did not have a plan because there's a huge shortage of RCMP officers. Many RCMP officers have retired. There's vacancies all over the place. They're not graduating enough from depot in Saskatchewan. So it's a lot safer and it makes a lot more sense to go to the Surrey transition so that Surrey can have their own police force. There's a downside of this because there are a lot of highly dedicated police officers from the RCMP who have been there for years. But this is what Surrey Council wanted, and they could not fulfill the obligations that are incumbent on them under the Police Act.
Well, and just before we let you go, Wally, how much of a role do you think the federal government played in all of this? Because we know that they're, exploring changing the RCMP to more of an FBI model, like what's done in the U.S., rather than policing cities on the ground.
That's a good question because there's a movement in Canada. They're questioning this whole concept of contract policing. Contract policing means a city enters into a contract with the federal government. They provide a police force for you. Many people have thought over the years that the RCMP should be a truly national police force, similar to the FBI, and they're really not suited to do city policing. People have questioned that. So that really is what the federal government has been thinking, and whether that happens is something only time will tell.
Wally Uppel joining us live tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
He's a Billboard-topping country music superstar, but singer Jason Aldean finds himself embroiled in controversy all over his latest music video. How he's responding to accusations of racism. Next.
From the outside, it hardly looks high-tech.
I'll be right away, sir.
But this cab company is home to some sophisticated computer and satellite technology.
Will you be waiting out front, ma'am?
For years now, some taxi companies have used data terminals like this one to keep in touch with drivers. What's leading edge about the system at Bel Air Taxi is that it's hooked into a web of satellites called GPS. GPS is the Global Positioning System, a network of 24 satellites set up by the U.S. military for navigation. It's now used by civilians like boaters and even hikers. A small receiver reads the satellite signals, figures out where the user is, and can even track the direction and speed they're going. The taxi system takes that one step further, transmitting to the main computer every few seconds exactly where the cab is. The dispatcher simply checks the screen to find out a cab's location and its status. For example, car 74 is purple when it's on its way to pick up a fare and turns light blue when the meter is turned on.
It gives us the ability to track the cars wherever they are. I'm told it's within approximately 100 feet of the actual vehicle location.
Addresses can be typed into the computer, and the dispatcher can give a lost driver directions. In an emergency, a red dot appears, and police know exactly where to go.
Oh, there's a cheater.
But the most practical application is finding cheaters, drivers who fib to the dispatchers about where they are.
Way off. He's around Metro Town. He's telling the computer he's just at the top of the hill here in Coquitlam.
A classic example of cheating is when a driver drops a fare off at the airport and then tells the computer he's actually downtown. What he hopes is by the time he gets here, he'll be at the top of the list. But sometimes the call comes while he's still 15 or 20 minutes away, leaving a customer fuming. But with GPS, a cheater can quickly be found out. And so, not surprisingly, drivers are a little ambivalent about this new system.
We make more money by cheating, as we make now. but customer get good service if we don't cheat.
The company that developed the Bel Air taxi system predicts that within a few years, virtually every car will have something similar.
So you might know as you're driving down on Highway 99 where your wife is, where your dad is, where your son is. I mean, you could see them on the map. And I mean, if they're close enough, you may want to send them a message saying, hey, maybe we can have coffee together. I mean, that is not far-fetched.
The main obstacle now is money. For big taxi companies, this system could cost tens of thousands of dollars. But manufacturers say one day GPS will be no more exotic or expensive than a car stereo. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Coquitlam, British Columbia.
The Women's World Cup will proceed as planned in New Zealand this week, despite a fatal shooting in the host city of Auckland.
The offender was armed with a pump-action shotgun. He moved through the building site, discharging the firearm as he went.
3 people are dead, including the shooter, but the Prime Minister says there is no national security risk. A police officer is among the 6 hurt. And with that, FIFA Women's World Cup about to kick off in Australia and New Zealand. Canada is a contender after winning gold at the Tokyo Olympics 2 years ago. But as Katie Nicholson reports, the players are heading into the tournament with some unsettled business back home.
The hustle on the field, a little spicier today.
I think it's very cool that she was in North Toronto just like me. Yeah. And made it all the way up there, so it gives me hope that I could do that too.
Excitement bubbling over because one of their own, Olivia Smith, is playing at the World Cup. 10-year-old Cassie Tuen doesn't intend to miss a single game.
We can see what kind of skill moves they're doing and how they beat off their defenders, so it really inspires us to be better.
The women's game has come a long way in Canada and the world.
I think this is going to be the best World Cup ever. Every single World Cup, because women have come from, rags to closer to riches in terms of the game and opportunities for girls around the world. And so each time, the level is just getting higher and higher.
Also high, tensions over pay equity. Many of the teams at this World Cup embroiled in labor disputes with their home organizations. Canada is no exception. But for now, players are trying to keep their eye on the ball.
We've compartmentalized that. We're totally focused on the tournament. Janine and our lawyers are dealing with that away from here.
Pay isn't the only thing changing. At this soccer club, a push to get more women in the coach's seat.
You see behind me, most of the people here today are females, and we do that just to have representation.
Cassie Tuen doesn't think too much about those fights off the pitch to make the women's game better. She's just focused on winning.
Oh, nice. You should never give up, even if you tried and it's still not working. Just keep on going because you never know what's gonna happen. How I'm keeping on shooting on you, and you never know when it's gonna go in. Bye-bye!
And by the time these girls get their shot at the top, they might be on equal footing with the men. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
From Preston Manning's legendary makeover to Stephen Harper's cowboy debut, Conservatives have had their fair share of iconic transformations. Now some are noticing Pierre Poilievre's new look, opting for more casual wear and no glasses during his latest tour of Canada. JP Tasker has more.
And they said it couldn't be done.
Pierre Poilievre's style has been consistent for years, including navy blue suits and prominent eyewear.
It's common sense.
So the new look is notable.
My wife says I look better without glasses, so I have to keep her happy, first and foremost.
While that may be, the change coincides with his party's lackluster performance in recent by-elections. And it's not just the clothes. Well known for sparring with reporters,
we have basically a liberal heckler who snuck in here today.
The leader took questions about his image revamp in stride.
Whether or not I wear glasses, I have the best vision for the country.
He's not the first politician to go through a makeover. As Reform Party leader, Preston Manning scrapped his Coke bottle glasses, and Poilievre's predecessor, Aaron O'Toole, started running and took to fitted black t-shirts in campaign material.
You can't fatten a pig on market day. You can't do everything at the last minute. You can't suddenly become the perfect version of yourself weeks before an election.
This Conservative strategist says the timing of the change is where Poilievre is trying to succeed where others have failed. The pivot coming well before the next expected election. Time for the public to get used to it, and the leader as well.
It's scary. It's scary to go out and not be in your formal battle dress of a suit and tie and glasses and speak to the public in your casual clothes.
This Ottawa insider has trained politicians on image and media. She says Poilievre's trying to win over skeptical voters with a softer touch.
You can't just win with the base. It's got to get bigger than that.
Poilievre's hammered the Prime Minister on inflation and foreign interference. It hasn't moved the needle. The Tories hope the new image can help their leader trade up to a new job. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, one of country music's biggest stars is under some scrutiny tonight, just days after Jason Aldean released his new video, Try That in a Small Town. A U.S. music channel has cut it from rotation. Critics call it a pro-violence anthem with racial undertones, but the singer is defending his work, and so are his fans. Here's Katie Simpson now with the outrage and the reaction.
The criticism starts with the music video's location. Jason Aldean and his band are playing at the same site where an 18-year-old black man was lynched in 1927. And then there's the content of the song itself.
It's basically about how you'll get your ass whipped, or worse, possibly, if you do certain things that small-town people don't like.
Protesters and dangerous city folk are what small-town people don't like, according to Aldean, who paints big city America as a violent hellscape. Though if you look closely, you'll notice Canada. That's actually a Toronto police cruiser parked on Queen Street. But that's beside Aldean's point as he uses the chorus as a warning.
Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town.
Critics say Aldean's song is full of racist dog whistles.
Demographically, who usually lives in cities? Black folks. The answer is black folks.
And problematic anti-protest themes.
People have interpreted it as an anti-Black Lives Matter song. That's what people associate with protests here in America.
The backlash prompted country music television to stop playing the video. Aldean is standing by his work, saying the criticism is not only meritless, but dangerous, and that there is not a single lyric in the song that references race.
I am shocked by what I'm seeing in this country, with people attempting to cancel this song and cancel Jason and his beliefs.
In conservative circles, Aldean is being praised, even landing an invite from a Republican governor to play her front yard. The polarized reaction is a clear sign Aldean is in the middle of a long-standing U.S. culture war that continues to divide the country. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Up next, BC doesn't factor in humidity when issuing heat warnings, and there's concern that's making the hot weather more dangerous. Why it matters, next.
The vision started with Susan Pepper. Her vision was to have a safe space for our homeless people to come into, have a coffee.
This is our kitchen, nothing fancy. We prepare basic meals here for our clients, visitors. Good afternoon, Hope House. How can I help you? My name is Sharon Rogers, and I'm community frontline worker. Since we opened, we served about 1,600 people. Yes, and also we tally it by month, and it's roughly 210 a month. Yeah, so it's very well needed. Sometimes we have 30 people, 40 people in a day. Basic needs, if a homeless person just got a home, or someone that was disadvantaged, that just was approved for a home. We're going to help them with basic needs for a kitchen.
Okay, I'm Johnny Afghana. I'm one of the frontline workers for the Hope House. They went ahead and asked me to build these 2 tent frames, which are 12 by 14s, for their programs outside. They can do carving or, you know, some sewing out here or some meetings or whatever they want to do. The Hope House is a good place for people to come and sit and eat and, you know, visit and, you know, chat, and because we're here to listen and, you know, communicate with them and, you know, talk about their issues and stuff like that. So it's a good place.
I believe it's well needed a long time ago. We're probably behind in making a place like this for them. It's a safe place, it's a safe environment, no judgment here. Come and visit us. We're open from 9 to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Friday. Come and visit us and see what we're about.
A warning from the Climate and Weather Division of the United Nations. As the CBC's Abby Kugadasan reports, it says the heat wave in the Northern Hemisphere is set to intensify as parts of Europe are already baking.
The Italians are calling it the week of hell. Incredible, she says. We've never experienced such high temperatures. It's really awful. Almost every city in the country is under red alert. That's a warning for everyone, not just vulnerable groups. In the capital, people are being asked to stay indoors during the hottest hours of the day. But historic landmarks are attracting tourists despite the sizzling temperatures. For elderly people who call Rome home but can't leave their homes, doctors like this one are making house calls every day. Seniors, he says, often share their fears with him. He lends a listening ear while he monitors their health. I'm worried about my blood pressure, says this woman, concerned too because she's on her own.
Volunteers that just can go to them, have a chat with them and support them by just giving them also a hug and by staying with them.
The Red Cross has a 24/7 phone service to provide immediate medical assistance.
Last year, we had a lot of people that were struggling with this hot wave, but during this year, even more.
Some emergency units facing an increase in patients by 20%.
We need more that people do not go to the hospital when it is not strictly necessary.
The health ministry has called for hospitals to set up special units to ramp up care outside normal hours and provide out-of-hospital care, just like they did during the pandemic.
Exposure to excessive heat has wide-ranging impacts for health, often amplifying pre-existing conditions and resulting in premature death and disability.
The World Meteorological Organization says Europe is warming twice as fast as other continents. Abby Kugadasan, CBC News, London.
New projections show Canada could get much muggier in the future. Climate change doesn't just mean higher temperatures, it's likely to bring more humidity as well. Right now, BC and Alberta don't factor in the humidex when issuing heat warnings. The CBC's Jayla Bernstein explains why that could be dangerous.
Working in the dry heat, nothing new for southern Alberta, but humid heat, that's rare.
This time of year is probably the most humid it gets, which isn't very humid.
That may change. Global warming threatens to bring more hot and humid weather to the west, disrupting industries like construction.
Here in Montreal, people are used to humidex. That's how warm it feels when heat and humidity mix. Too much humidity, and it's harder to cool off by sweating. It's a foreign concept for parts of BC and Alberta.
It's just something they're not prepared for, and more people to be affected, and possibly more morbidity.
Depending on greenhouse gas emissions, projections show Vancouver could see up to about 26 more high humidex days by the end of the century. Edmonton could see 30 more, and Lethbridge, Alberta could see an increase of 38 high humidex days.
We're a resilient group here in southern Alberta, and I think we will just have to make do.
He says the construction industry can adapt, shifting work hours earlier or later. Farming, too, will have to adjust.
It would make a lot of things just really challenging in terms of getting things done outside. So if we need to move cattle that day, we need to move cattle that day regardless of the temperature.
Alberta and BC are the only provinces that don't trigger heat warnings based on humidex alone. A concern for the city of Lethbridge, where people are already feeling the heat.
This puts us in an awkward situation when we know things are happening in the community, but we're not meeting specific thresholds of a provincially defined emergency. What we've done is, by utilizing the Municipal Government Act, we've actually found a way where we can define our own emergency.
It's one local solution to new extremes, as Canada pledges to eliminate heat wave deaths by 2040. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
Time now to check in with Darius Madavi. Speaking of humidity, you are watching the east coast of Canada closely. What's happening there?
Well, we have two separate heat warnings across the country today. One in the east coast over Newfoundland and one here in BC. Now, I think it's a really good example of what a big difference humidity makes in terms of determining heat. I think a lot of people here in Vancouver are just getting used to the idea of 30-degree summers, so the idea of adding humidity in on top of that is probably not very appealing. The heat warnings we have here in BC are in the Fraser Canyon and the Okanagan, and we're looking at temperatures around the mid-30s, mid to high 30s, really. Now, imagine if we had included the humidex in that as well. If we look over to Newfoundland, they're only seeing highs of around 32 degrees Celsius, very hot for Newfoundland. But it's when we factor in the humidex that things get really crazy. 42-degree humidex, or 42 humidex, which means that if we had that same humid weather here in BC, temperatures would just skyrocket. And so the idea of climate change bringing these really humid days is really concerning. Now, if we were to focus just on BC, I'm going to show this satellite and radar map one more time, just to show this high-pressure ridge once more. Because if we look at the precipitation we can expect over the next couple of days, you'll notice a bit in the south. Now, this is not any serious precipitation. This is just little isolated showers, likely from convection. Chance of thunderstorms here. Most of the precipitation we're getting is over the north coast, and that's the story through the rest of the week as well. If we look to Thursday and then we look to Friday, it looks like a lot of green, but these are relatively small and not significant amounts of rainfall. Could bring our fire danger back down, so that would be good news, but it just really highlights that that trough is weakening. But tomorrow, it doesn't happen quite yet. These showers that we can see in the forecast tomorrow, not anything too significant. Really just sun, especially in the south. And if we look at Vancouver, it's the same story. Nothing but sun until maybe next week. We'll see.
All right. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, skipping is more than just a hobby for this Japanese teenager who spent years trying to make the perfect jump. Now he's made history. We'll show you how he's broken records after the break.
wanted to do an exhibition about the history of weddings in Newfoundland Labrador. People often think of us as being on the edge of the world and not being connected to the outside world, when in actual fact, through the fashion that is expressed in these dresses, we are on the cutting edge. We are like super fashionable. Hi, I'm Maureen Peters, Curator of History here at the Rooms in St. John's, Newfoundland Labrador, and today I'm going to show you the exhibit Tying the Knot, a history of weddings in Newfoundland Labrador. So this dress is from 1823. It's the earliest wedding dress we have in the collection, and it's very indicative of the time period because it's got the empire waist and the puffy sleeves that kind of go out and give a broader shoulder look. And we have the 60s dress, and you can see again it's got the puffy time period. It would have been worn with a crinoline. This dress here was purchased in Port aux Basques for a bride in Burnt Islands. In the 1990s, we have a very elaborate dress. She saw it in a magazine and wanted to make something similar for herself, so she handmade it and did it all herself. And the detail work on this, you have to come in and see this and just see how much absolute beautiful detail work is done on it. I asked Gina how much time she spent making this dress, and she said it was between 1680 hours of hand beating on this dress. So it's just an absolute act of love.
And I'm curious, you know, when you look at the historical record, are we more likely to see the bride's material, that kind of material culture, from the well-to-do?
Yes, for sure. We definitely, the vast majority of the collection was from more of the wealthy families, and it was very St. John's heavy. So when I was getting the stories down, I was trying to get across Newfoundland and Labrador, and also try to get people from all different types of classes and different cultures and religious backgrounds. This was a soldier's gift from his interpreter. Gave him this when he was coming back to Newfoundland and Labrador to get married. His interpreter gave him an Afghan wedding dress as a gift. Tori and Stephen got married in a traditional Mi'kmaq ceremony, and Chief Msil Joe gave them ceremonial feathers during their weddings.
So when people come by and they walk through and they look at all these exhibits from yesteryear, what takeaway do you want them to have?
Well, this exhibit was really about kind of seeing the breadth of the collection and seeing what kind of interesting wedding stuff we have, and maybe be a bit influenced about if you're getting married next year. Maybe there's something in here that will inspire your own wedding, your own wedding dress, and kind of think about Newfoundland Labrador traditions and how marriages have evolved over the time in Newfoundland Labrador.
A Japanese teenager has jumped right into the record books by pulling off an incredible jump rope trick. Take a look. Hidaka Kirado was recognized with a Guinness World Record 50 minutes after he started roping, and on the 28th try, he successfully did a jump rope octuple under. That means he swung the rope around himself 8 times on a single jump. Hidaka started practicing when he was in grade 5 to get better at something he felt he wasn't good at. Years later, on his 15th birthday, he was able to accomplish this memorable feat. 8 times in the air, come on, easy peasy, right? No, an incredible feat. Congratulations, not something I could pull off at all. That brings us to the end of CBC Vancouver News. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.